everyone. This is Greg Drevenstedt, editor-in-chief at Rider Magazine. Normally, I'm your host for the Rider Magazine Insider podcast, but we're fortunate to have contributing editor Scott Williams, also known as Bones, as our guest host for episode 62. Scott interviewed Ed Conde as part of an upcoming profile of Ed that will be published in Rider Magazine. Scott and Ed are fellow Bay Staters, or Massachusettsans, boy, that's a mouthful, who have been riding together for years. Both are part of the New England Riders, a loosely knit but passionate group of motorcyclists who get together for rides, track days, and other activities. Although he didn't start riding motorcycles until he was 47, Conde has cultivated a reputation as a leading routemeister, as Bones calls him. Over the past 20 years, Conde has done extensive research and developed an impressive catalog of excellent motorcycling routes throughout Eastern North America, from Newfoundland to Alabama. In this episode, Scott and Ed talk about their shared interest in sport touring, how they met through a Honda ST1300 group, and what goes into developing a first-class motorcycle route. They also discuss the challenges of using Garmin Basecamp software, the pros and cons of maps versus GPS, and the valuable resources that are available on the newenglandriders.org website. I hope you enjoy the episode. I want to thank Scott Williams for being our guest host, and you can check out my interview with Scott on episode 41. Thanks for listening, and keep the rubber side down.
Hi, this is Scott Williams. I'm here today with my special guest, Ed Conde. I wanted to start by thanking Greg Drevenstedt, the editor-in-chief of Rider Magazine, for the opportunity to be a guest host for this edition of Rider Insider Podcast. And we're going to be talking with Ed Conde, who is my personal friend and the one person that I go to for questions about putting together routes for great places to ride a motorcycle. There's nobody quite like Ed for doing that. What's interesting is how I met Ed. This cool fall morning, I think it was 2009, and a bunch of riders from the Honda ST13 community met at the Dunkin' Donuts in West Boylston, Massachusetts. We were completing a stage of the Pony Express Relay. Basically, it's like a poker run for charity, but we were all long distance riders. So our poker run eventually crisscrossed the country 3 times, and we would stop at the state capitol buildings at each of the lower 48 states and hand off the relay bag to the next rider, Pony Express style. So Ed, who I was meeting for the first time, had the bag, and he offered to lead about half a dozen of us from Central Mass to downtown Boston. And there he officially would hand off the bag to me, and I would take it for the next leg. So short story is I was floored, absolutely floored, that Ed found so many fun winding roads to get us there. It's not that Eastern Massachusetts suddenly became Western North Carolina, but Ed assembled a route that was challenging and entertaining. It followed scenic, curvy roads in good repair with little traffic. It was really uncanny. And in the 14 years that Ed and I have been friends, I've come to know that as Signature Ed. So I got to ask you, Ed, where did you get your talent for creating such engaging motorcycle routes?
Well, thanks for having me, Bones, and Ryder. And it actually came from my old ski days, in which we would travel all over the Northeast and into Canada, trying to hit every nice ski area in the region. And it was kind of boring going on interstates all the time. So we started looking for nice roads, interesting things to see while we were doing our ski trips. And over many years, we managed to hit most of the different ski areas. And I started marking up maps, trying to keep track of all of my favorite things. And over time, I had a whole bunch of maps all highlighted with things that I really enjoyed. And those came in handy years later when I started motorcycling and started seeing all those same roads again, but in the summer with leaves on the trees, which was pretty nice to see them in the summertime instead of all full of ice and snow.
All right, so you said when you started motorcycling some years later, how old were you when you started riding?
I was 47. I came to motorcycling late. And but I think that made it so that I appreciated it maybe a bit more than I would have if I had done it when I was younger. And younger, I was doing other things, but my brother offered me a little taste. He got a bike and he said, "Hey, you want to try it out?" And being the good brother that I am, I figured, why not? Let's give it a try.
You're being
And,
so helpful.
absolutely. And so I went on a ride with it and I thought, wow, I mean, this reminds me a lot of skiing. I mean, we are banking into our turns, we're going and getting to see great scenery. And it was a whole bunch of fun. And I was hooked from the first ride. I just thought that it was amazing that you could go out and do some of the same things on the roads that we were doing on the slopes and have a great time doing it.
So the first motorcycle you rode, what was that?
That was an old Honda Shadow VLX. It was a really good bike to start on because it was very underpowered, very low seat, easy to ride. And my brother, great guy, he said, "Here, why don't you just take it for a while and keep it as long as you want." So I did. And so I just started riding all around, checking different roads out and different areas, and just went from there.
What about the first motorcycle that you owned yourself? I'm guessing you had to give that one back to your brother at some point. What was your first ride?
Well, he then gave me a Sportster to ride, which I rode for a couple of years. And my wife, Debbie, has fond memories of that bike because parts would keep coming off and she'd have to dodge them on the bike as a new rider. And so it was a lot of fun riding that bike. We had a lot of fun on it. But then one day I took a trip to California with my brother. And we rented bikes, and I rented a BMW 1200 RT, a nice sport tourer. And that really opened my eyes because up until that point, I hadn't been on a bike quite like that before. And with the RT, I was really able to carve the turns and feel the power, and it just hit something visceral inside of me. And ever since, I've been riding sport touring bikes. And so the first one I had myself was an old Honda ST 1100. And from there, I've since had two 1300 STs. And now I'm looking for my next sport tour, and I'm really not sure what I'm going to end up on.
Huh. Yeah, so it's interesting that you had an ST 1300 and I did. At the time, that was how we actually came together, was through the ST 1300 community. So that's kind of an interesting segue to motorcycling communities. The one that we're still connecting through all the time is NER, New England Riders. There's an interesting bit of history about New England Riders and how it started and how it really has grown to become a lot more than just New England. So how did you first find out about NER?
It was just an online search for motorcycling in New England. And it was the first thing that popped up. And so I watched the group for a while just to get an idea of what it was like. And the first thing I noticed was that there wasn't a lot of the bickering and meanness that there was on other groups that I had looked in on. And this one, everyone seemed to get along pretty well. And they also were on different bikes. I mean, it was a little unusual at the time to see groups that people were on cruisers, they were on sport bikes, and I kind of liked that. That appealed to me, that their thinking wasn't too rigid. And so we started meeting up. I went to a number of events. I met Bob Fessmeyer, who was the head of the group at the time, and we just seemed to click. I loved the culture. I loved the way that they made everyone feel welcome, and just went from there.
So how would you describe the culture of NER? You say you like it. What is it you like about it?
There's no rules, for one thing. It doesn't have a strict hierarchy. It doesn't have a bunch of rules in which you have to do things a certain way. there's no preferred bike. The main thing in the group is to just be a decent human being, treat people well. And no matter what you're on, no matter what you're riding, no matter what you're wearing, it doesn't matter. Everyone is welcome as long as they treat other people well. And for me, that really hit a chord. I really enjoyed that because I had been to a couple of events in some other groups, and if I didn't have the right bike, or if I wasn't wearing the right thing, I didn't feel like I really was welcome. I belonged. Whereas with NER, I felt like I was with among friends from the first day. And it's the fact that you could go to an event and see sport bikes, and you could see trikes, you could see tourers, cruisers, all together, and everyone getting along and treating each other well. That really appealed to me, and I liked that a lot.
I can tell you from my own experience with NER that one of the things that I like about it is how welcoming the group is to women riders. And you probably have some special insight into that, because I happen to know that you had 7 sisters growing up.
I did, and you learned to treat your sisters and women well. Otherwise, there's ramifications. And but also, you see that sometimes women riders can face challenges that the males don't have to face, and in being included and feeling like they are welcome in a group, and their thoughts and what they do really are important. And in our group, it is. And it's something that we have tried over the years to be very attuned to. We want to be a place where women riders can come to events and feel welcome. And I think we've done a good job of that.
I would have to agree with that. And one of the things that's nice too is that you're just as likely to see women at some of the events that NER takes part in, like the non-sport bike track days, the training days at the track, where women show up on their bikes and they're doing track days like anybody else. And it's nice to feel like you can be in a group, and you don't have to be in a group that is just for women in order to feel like you're welcome. You can just be in the group.
Absolutely. And not only are they participating, they're doing better than most of the guys. I mean, I could tell you from experience that at these events, the women seem to listen better and apply what they learn a little better than the average guy does. And we have some women riders in our group that can ride the wheels off their bike. I mean, they're really tremendous, and their skills are top notch. And we've done some rides together where I look in my mirror and my wife and the other women riders are behind me, and I'm just taken by how perfect everything is. I mean, it's just amazing. And I wish more groups would be able to include their women riders and make them feel welcome as well, because they just add so much to the group. And I'm very grateful that they're part of NER.
I'm pretty sure that I met your wife, Deborah, at a track day. So probably the very first track day that NER, sponsored, for lack of a better term. It was the first time that there had been a track day set up specifically, I mean, in our area certainly, but set up specifically for folks that weren't riding sport bikes. And the idea would be to spend some time in a classroom, focus on a skill, go on the track and work on that skill, come back, have some time to talk to your instructors or your fellow riders, and then back to the classroom again. And that cycle worked throughout the day. And it was great because you had a chance to practice some of these skills, throttle control and braking and working your lines through turns. They're all things that you can practice at speed, safely on a track. And then when it comes time to transition those skills for safer riding on the road, it's a very smooth transition. But I met Debbie at the track day, and she was doing great and loving every bit of it.
I remember that day. It was at Thompson, Connecticut. And
Yeah.
I remember you riding really well as well. I mean, you rocked it that day.
Oh,
And
thank you.
it's those non-sport track days are the best training days that I know of. And they've been sponsored by Riding in the Zone, Ken Condon and Tony's track days. And I think a lot of people think of track days as going to the races, going and on a track and riding accordingly, whereas that is far from the case here. These non-sport bike track days are a day in which you can go and just work on things on your bike like any other great road. If you want to work on the same turn over and over again, apply what you listen and hear in a classroom to on the road, you can do that. And you can do it in a way where you don't need to worry about oncoming traffic and things on the road. And it's very freeing. It's very nice that way, in which you can have a great day riding and learning things at the same time and have expert instruction, people giving you feedback, videos, there's photos, and you get a really good idea of how you're doing and what you can do to perhaps make your riding a little better.
We were talking about great women riders. Ken Condon's daughter, Janine, is one of the people that I've had as instructor at track day a number of times. And boy, she's a great teacher like her dad. And also talking about riding the wheels off a bike. She was great working on following her and following her line through the various turns. This was at the Palmer Motorsports Park. Great, lot of fun. You're tired at the end of a track day like that. It's a good workout mentally and physically. And it's also a hoot because, you know, you get to go as fast as you really want. Although you learn pretty early on that you want to develop your smoothness first, and the speed kind of develops out of being smooth.
Absolutely. They make it look awfully easy, don't they?
Yeah, well, they spend a lot of time on the track developing just those things.
The best ones always look like they're hardly working. That just they are so smooth that it makes it look like they are just, it's second nature to them. Whereas some of the rest of us have to work a little bit harder.
So moving on to the Route Meister, Ed Conde, we were talking about the maps that you developed, that you put all the great places to ride and eat and sleep, and places to see great sights and all from the skiing days. How did you make that transition to motorcycling, and how did you take advantage of the improvements in technology from paper maps to what we have now?
I started with the paper maps and highlighting all of the roads, and I probably have about 100 maps here that have yellow scribbled all over them. And from there, I went to Streets and Trips, in which I basically repeated the same thing with online with a yellow highlight. And then I was out in an NER ride, and I saw Jim Cormier with a GPS following a route. And that seemed great to me, because up until that point, I was leading rides for NER using spreadsheets and trying to keep track of mileage during the ride to make sure that I turned at the right place. But then you'd have all these turns with no street signs. You weren't actually sure. And if you had to detour, then it was really hard, because your mileage counts were now all off. And you had to be riding and try to remember, okay, take those numbers and subtract 7.4. Right. And then it could be a challenge at times. Seeing him with a GPS, I thought that was great, because you could just follow a route and almost turn your mind off to routing and put all of your energy on the road, what you're passing, cars that are coming, and safety. And that appealed to me a lot. So I bought myself a GPS and tried to learn it best I can. Back in the day, it was Garmin Map Source.
I remember that.
Yes. And so at the time, I was leading a lot of rides, but I also started hosting trips for New England riders. And we would go to different locations. Back a couple of the early ones were Stowe, Vermont, and Lake George, New York. And my wife, Debbie, and Debbie rides with me almost everywhere. We would go to these locations 3, 4, however many times it took to ride every road in the area that looked promising. And before these trips, I'd go on Google Maps and paper maps and look at squiggly lines, look at things that looked interesting that would run along rivers, up over mountains, had very little cross streets, went through parks, and we would try to hit all of those different roads on our scouting trips. And once we had done all of them, we'd weed it all down to the very best of a region. And we would use those as the basic for our trip rides. And a place like Stowe, we've done, I think it's 8 or 9 different trips there over the years. So each time we would go back, we tweaked the rides a little more until we were left with what I felt was the very best riding in that particular region. But then over time, I've been doing these trips now for almost 20 years. We had trips up in Maine. We had trips all through New Hampshire, Vermont, all through New York, Pennsylvania, Ohio. We have one up and coming in West Virginia. All these scouting trips have merged together. And we now have a site where it's the best of the Northeast and the best of the Appalachians, where we're covered Newfoundland to Alabama. So we now have all the best rides, roads, scenic views, attractions, hotels, restaurant that covers all the best riding in the East. And it's something that has taken many, many years to put together, but I'm very happy with where we are now. I'm pretty close to done updating that, but if I see anything or one of our riders shares something that looks appealing, we'll go and we'll ride it, we'll visit it to see if it is worth adding to the site, and if it is, then we'll add it. And so everything on there has been visited and has been tried out, whether it's a road or a restaurant, to make sure that it is one of the best things in the region. And we try very hard not to list everything good, just the best things. And that way people aren't overwhelmed by a huge amount of information. There's still a lot of information there because there's a lot of good riding. But if you ride a road or do a ride that is on that website, you can pretty much count that it's going to be good.
That website, by the way, is newenglandriders.org, and it is a fabulous resource. A number of us were involved in a site upgrade about 2 years ago now, and it's very user-friendly, easy to find routes you can go by, the trips that Ed's mentioning. You can search that way. You can search by a locale, pick a state. You can download all the best roads from a particular area and then just piece them together yourself and make routes that work for your location or your other travel plans. newenglandriders.org is a fabulous resource.
Yeah, and if I could, I'd like to give a shout out to Steve Gallant. Steve is a webmaster who spent a lot of time upgrading our website from an old Microsoft website, which I was able to do, to something a lot nicer. And Steve spent an incredible amount of time updating this site, making it modern and making it very easy to use.
And Steve is a legit long distance rider, having been involved in the Iron Butt rallies, and he's somebody that not only understands the world of computing, but he's a motorcycle guy. So that lends a lot of great insight into making the resource not just usable, but usable and really useful for people that ride.
Yes, Steve is also a great guy.
Yeah,
we're very fortunate to have him as part of the group.
Now, one of the things that is so nice about this website is if all you want to do is download existing routes to a GPS, you don't even have to know how to do a whole lot of anything computerized. You can basically download the routes and just drop them on your GPS and go. So there's also something that exists on the website that helps people that might not know how to take advantage of Garmin's Basecamp navigation program, which is a really powerful program. It's just unfortunately not one that Garmin seems to see the value in supporting. So I'll actually get Ed to describe how is it that New England Riders is helping the people of the world that want to learn how to use Basecamp do it well.
We take great pride in making the routes plug and play, like you said, where people don't have to do any modifications and all to have a great day. But a lot of people do like to create their own routes and do so in a location where we may not have a ride available. So for them, we listed our best roads and best views, etc., so they could make their own rides. And of all the apps and programs that I've used, Basecamp has been the most powerful because of its database structure. And I saw that a lot of people were having a hard time learning it. And like you said, there's really not a lot of help on Garmin's site to help people learn that program. So we wrote a couple of agendas in which it's basically you do along what the agenda is saying, and you experience it for yourself rather than just seeing a video or watching something. You're actually doing it along with the agenda. And I've taught a number of courses on Basecamp, and doing it this way seems to be a way where people remember it best and have the best chance of success. So with these agendas, which Garmin has been using as their help files for a number of years, you can learn within a few hours how to use that program, but it has to be someone that is able to look at written directions, follow them, and feels comfortable doing that. And if you can do that, it's a really great place to go, and it's a great program to use.
I know that my own experience, having taken a couple of the courses that you've taught, is that the best way to learn the program is to use it. And those agendas, which you can download on the New England Riders website, take you step by step from how to set up your GPS to the simplest routing steps to, if you want to go that far, to some of the more powerful aspects of timing and building in waypoints and all sorts of things that are really useful. And then you can develop your own library of routes. It makes it great to be able to share them with other riders. It just, you need to make a bit of effort to learn it, but it actually goes a lot more smoothly than you might think it does, because following the agenda makes it work really quite nicely.
Yes, the program's not intuitive. If you just try to go on and figure it out, it can lead to a lot of frustration. But following the agenda, I think it can be very manageable to learn it in the day. And with Basecamp, you can create, and I do this all the time, a great route anywhere in the East within just a couple of minutes. And I can guarantee the combination of the NER website and Basecamp will make it so that you can put together your own great rides very.
You mentioned the word in the East, and for the many Rider magazine subscribers that don't happen to live in the East, they might not appreciate how many great roads there really are in the East. I mean, out West, everything's wide open spaces, and there's a lot of scenic beauty. You come to the East and it's more congested, but there's also been people living here for so long that a lot of the roads that used to be, for horse and buggy, a lot of them just got paved, and they still are very beautiful, twisty, windy roads that go, through mountains, along rivers, along the coast. But it can be a challenge to try to put all of them together into a route that is easy to follow.
Yeah, it's very different in the East. We really don't have an Angeles Crest highway in which you get on and you ride for 100+ miles with great curves and you don't need to worry about turns. Here, there are a lot of great roads, but they tend to be shorter, and you have to be able to wind your way around any congestion or boring areas in order to link them together. And that's where a GPS or routing app can be very valuable. You can ride all day on great roads away from cars and traffic as long as you have an app or some navigation set up to allow you to do that.
What do you find the best way is to actually do that?
I have a whole bunch of off the grid roads that I like to ride. And the way to do that is to quickly download a set of those type of roads into a folder and then just quickly link them together or just draw over it, send it to your GPS and go. And it's not hard I live just outside of Boston, and it's not hard to put together a route where we ride for hours and we don't see cars. We don't see McDonald's. We don't see commerce. And then you come out for lunch and it's, oh, wow, here we are. And you can do that with navigation. It would be very, very hard to do that without.
So does that mean that you're tied to technology?
Not at all. And a lot of these roads that I like to ride, I found them either just through wandering around or just going online, and you can go on Google Street View to see what something looks like. But the beauty of navigation is if you don't feel like following anything, just shut it off. I mean, you don't need to run it. And also, if you see something interesting, go that way. And you don't need to worry about getting lost because the GPS will route you back. Or like I say, just shut it off for the rest of the day and go explore. You don't have to be a slave to the technology, but it's nice to know it's there if you want it.
Gives you the opportunity to enjoy the ride too, and not have to have so much of your mental focus on following your fender and figuring out where your next turn's going to be. You can just listen to the GPS prompt in your head that tells you, turn right on Conde Highway or whatever the road happens to be. And you don't need to worry so much about keeping a group together too, because if everybody that you're riding with has the route on a GPS, then everybody can just ride their own ride, and you know where the stops are, and you know where the lunch place is going to be, and you can keep a group together without really having to do a whole lot of following the others, because everybody can follow the route on their own.
Yeah, it's for me, a GPS allows me to ride without distraction. And I see so many car drivers and some people on bikes that seem very distracted when they're driving or riding, be it with a phone or just chatting with someone next to them, or simply looking for addresses or street names. I think most riders know that feeling where the vehicle in front of you is sort of vaguely going at a slowish speed and you're really not sure what they're going to do. And you see a lot of that with people that are looking. They're looking for something. Whereas with navigation, you can set it up so it's via audio, so you don't even have to look at your GPS or app, but you'll hear turn left 0.1 miles or turn left ahead on whatever the name of the street is. And it really frees up a big part of your mind that you used to have to use to navigate, to actually be looking around and looking for that car that may be coming out of a side street or a driveway. For me, I find it a safer way to ride. But like I said, you're not feeling it that way that day, just shut it off.
Well, and I don't want to shut you off. And I get the feeling that you and I could probably keep talking for about 2 hours and then go out and find a nice cold beer somewhere. But I think our time is probably up for the afternoon. Is there anything that you'd like to conclude with?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd like to thank, first of all the great people in NER, but especially the admins that help the group so much. Mike Woods, Steve Bruning, Steve Gallant, Greg Nebbia, Kate Murphy, and Tim Mangini, who has been running our photo contest. This is an interactive group without a committee. There's no one that sets up events and all. So it's all just regular riders that are keeping the group running and keeping the events going. And the admins give up their time for no pay and no glory. And I'm very thankful to all of them for keeping such a great group going. And
Hear, hear.
I'm very happy I found the group. It's brought a lot of joy to Debbie and I, and I'm glad to help out any way I can.
Wonderful. So thanks for listening to the Rider Insider podcast today for Ed Conde. Thank you very much, Ed. And I'm Scott Williams, and the next time we'll talk to you again.
Thanks for having me.
If you've enjoyed listening to the Rider Magazine Insider Podcast, please subscribe, leave us a positive rating, and tell your friends. We also encourage you to visit ridermagazine.com, where you can get the latest in motorcycle news and reviews and sign up for our free weekly newsletter. You can also subscribe to print and digital editions of Rider Magazine, which is published 12 times a year. Thanks again for listening.